Hi, in this video I will show how to remove and mount a brake disc or rotor, as it's called often in cycling industry, on disc brake wheels. And as always, you will have to put up with my Tarzan English, my pauses while I think what I want to say, how what I want to say is pronounced in English, and with any background noises. In this video's description I will put a table of contents so that you can skip to the parts of interest. This first part is called the introduction. And first thing, why would you want to remove brake disc and replace it? There are several reasons. First that come to my mind are because the disc is worn. It's worn when the thickness of the disc of this braking section comes down to under 1.5 millimeters usually. I'll make a separate video explaining that and how to measure it, but this is just briefly to note that. Also, if you want to do any kind of hub work, to overhaul your hub or whatever, I like to remove the disc, because that way I prevent it from getting any damage, either by me bending it or doing it some other scratch or damage, or by just touching it with greasy hands, so that later I have to spend more time to clean it and degrease it before putting it on a bicycle, for reasons that I will not explain in this video, but it's not good when your brakes are greasy generally. And now there are several types of disc brake mounts, and the mounting and dismounting procedure depends on which type of disc brake you have. Two basic ones are one with 6 bolts, 6-bolt type, and the other that is called Centerlock. When it comes to Centerlock, there are two major, most widely used systems. One is shown here. This one has the Centerlock that has notches for placing the tool on the outside, and the other system has notches that look like a cassette. I will remove the quick release lever to show and explain. The other 6-bolt type that I don't have with me now will have interface looking like this, and the outside will be round, no place to put your tool. And for mounting and dismounting this type of discs, you will use a cassette tool, perhaps one like this. So you will just slide it in and use something like this to unscrew it. When you're doing that, be mindful that freewheel removal tool looks almost exactly like a cassette tool. Make sure you have the right tool. Why? Because freewheel removal tool has a bit smaller diameter and a bit shorter. These splines are a bit smaller, so it will not engage properly. I will try to show it here from the outside. You can see how much gap there is and how little engagement. I can move it like this. So it's likely to be damaged if you try to unscrew a very tightly screwed Centerlock disc locknut. While with this tool, for the cassettes, it's a lot better fit. There's very little wiggle room and it works better. However, when you mount this on some wheels, it will not be able to engage completely. It will just come in like this. That's enough for it to work, but it will have a tendency to come out when you put the tool and try to use force to unscrew it. When that is the case, I usually use a quick release lever or whatever it is that holds the wheels in place. Just put it on, turn on, screw on the other side to keep it tight. First placing something like this. This is a spacer from an old rear wheel hub. That's very handy for that, so I put it in, then I screw in the cap on the other side, and that's it. It's held in place so I can put my tool and unscrew it easily, without it coming out. When we're talking about the 6-bolt type, I will get back to this later, I will demonstrate it, but with the 6-bolt type, it has 6 bolts that look a bit like this, and the diameter of the circle they are screwed in along is a bit smaller than this here. It has six like bolts spread around like this, approximately. Tools you will need for that are usually Torx 25, like this bit I have. This is my favorite method of doing it. I put it in this holder that goes on socket, and then I just unscrew them. You can also find tools that look like this Allen key, but they are for Torx 25. That also works. When you're mounting a 6-bolt disc after you've removed the old one or finished working on whatever it is you're working on the hub and you want to mount it, it is important to first screw all the 6 bolts finger tight, and then to make sure that the disc is aligned and it's not warped or goes sideways by having one side turned in or tightened too much, you should do a special pattern of tightening these bolts by always going to the opposite side. So for example, you tighten this bolt and then you tighten the opposite side bolt. After that you will not go to any of these, but you will go to the next one, then its opposite side, then go to the next one and its opposite side. And now you've done the whole circle. You will not go back here, but you could go back to one of these. Like let's say we start with this one, then go to the opposite side, then this one, then the opposite side, then we go back to this one and the opposite side. So it's important to keep them gradually tighter, going tighter in circle, but in this like pattern, so that you are always tightening the opposite side. The recommended torque for most of these bolts depends on the hub and on the disc model. Different manufacturers give different torque specification, but roughly 5 Newton meters is okay. Some recommend putting some thread locker onto the threads of the bolt. I will try to show it. Here this one has residue of a blue thread locker. I've already made a video where I explained why this is in my opinion an inherently unsafe system and I don't recommend it, but many hubs have it, so it's worth explaining. If you check on these bolts tightness, you're fine. You can generally work with it. And now let's see about this one. For removing this type of locknut, it's Centerlock, but the tool used for this is the same as the tool for Shimano Hollowtech II bottom brackets. There are several tools. This one is my favorite. It's Junior. This is the model. However, what I like about it is that you can put it on a, it's designed to be put on a, how do you call that? This one only bigger. That's socket wrench or something like that. Sorry. You put it on that and you can easily just work. When you are unscrewing, the bolt is tightened often to 40 Newton meters. So don't use a socket wrench, use a bar like this, because you don't want to damage the ratchet mechanism. This is for unscrewing, and this is just for screwing in, and after you've loosened it, then you can use it. But the problem with this exact Junior model is with some rear hubs, when I put this in, when I slide it on a socket to work, to tighten or loosen, this pushes it out against the axle, so I cannot put it close enough. Some 5 millimeters more needed. And that is why I cannot use it for the rear wheels most of the time. I have another tool by Shimano. Here is the model. I think it can be caught on camera. The problem with this tool is that it is too straight. So it catches onto the disc, it's uncomfortably close to the disc, I don't really like it. And it has a very short lever, and it has this open. So it does not hold this tightly enough, and it can sometimes damage. What I've done is I've made it bent it just a little bit and marked the side that is going outwards, so that I know how to work with it. And this way it's not too bad, but I prefer another tool. This is my tool of choice for these kinds of locknuts. It's made by Unior, and it's also imperfect because here the bend is too much, and so when I try to use a lot of force, this bend in the handle causes it to have a tendency to slide off. When I put in the force, it goes out and off. And so in order to keep it in place, I've improvised. And for my improvisation, here it is. I have four sprockets of an old cassette and an old cassette lockring. And this is the wide for M8, or you can use even M10 for nuts. This I'm not sure what this part is called, but that's it. That goes underneath the nut when you're tightening it. And I use the quick release lever, and this is my method. I put it to be the tool to be aligned where I need it. Then I slide these on, making sure the axle is in the middle. That's it. Now I hold it in place so it's not moving anywhere. Then I slide in the quick release, hold it in place, or whatever axle you have or some nut for holding it. You need to improvise. For those wider through axles, you don't need this. You can only use without this plate, the last one. And now, and here, I'm holding this all the way so it doesn't drop off. Here I put this. This is from an old cassette, from an old rear hub. It's a spacer. So I slide it on top so this can nicely engage. It doesn't hit the axle directly. I prefer when it's nicely held against this. And I just screw it in finger tight to keep my tool in place. There's no need to lock the quick release lever. You don't need too much torque here, too much preload, just to keep it snugly in place. And I double check, it's not wiggling, it's not moving, and now I can start unturning it. Again, Shimano recommends 40 Newton meters of tightening torque. That is a lot of torque, especially if the previous mechanic hadn't used any anti-seize mounting paste. It can get really stuck, and expect that you will need to use really a lot of force, and make sure that you are turning it anti-clockwise. If you start tightening it further, you will have problems releasing it. So first double check if you are going in the right direction counterclockwise. And the way to do it, for me at least the easiest way, is to use my weight. I weigh the wheel so it doesn't turn easily without any load, and I press on this. When it releases, if it was very stuck, it might release very suddenly, so make sure that you are in a stable stance so when your hand slips you don't tip over and break something either on you or even worse on your wheel. So now I will need to put a lot of force to remove this. Okay, and we're off. This is good. It's now going easily. I can now remove all these things that are getting in the way. Now I can remove the tool. And now I can use my hand to unturn it, or unscrew this, or if I need more force I can now use tool without too much force being applied. It won't slip off. And I'm unscrewing this. And now I will remove the disc. If I'm not throwing it away, if it's not worn, I will be careful not to touch the braking surface because I don't want to put any grease on it. And here it is. Now when you are mounting a new one, whenever I mount something, I usually put some mounting anti-seize paste. I've got articles explaining this and I will put them in a link in this video's description. Here I want to put it on these notches, on these splines, to prevent this from seizing. going all around. No need to put too much, but I want it all covered. Okay, this one is relatively high temperature resistant, so it won't melt and go sliming over the disc when you are braking to contaminate it. There it is. And now I also want to apply some mounting paste on the lockring, on its nuts, and on this serrated section. I already made a video explaining how this works, so I won't be going into details here now, but I want this to be with a bit of anti-seize, just in case I sleep better that way. And now I'm screwing it in gently, trying not to cross-thread it. It's better done this facing the disc, but I don't want to block the camera. Okay, here it is. I can wipe off any excess. Don't want to contaminate the disc. And now I need to tighten it. Okay, this is not tight enough. In order to tighten it to the proper torque, I will again need to put this on, as I've done already for dismounting it, because those are the kinds of tools I'm working with. I want to be sure it doesn't slip or damage anything. Alright, this is good. It's in place. Now the other side. Okay, this is tight, it's not rocking left to right. Now I need to tighten it. You're tightening it clockwise, and Shimano recommends 40 Newton meters. In my opinion and experience, you are listening to my advice at your own risk, use your own judgment, but 40 Newton meters is an overkill. It's too much. It is very likely to cause problems later on when you are trying to disassemble it again for whatever reason. You're also more likely to damage both threads and tools and the interface when working with those torques. 20 Newton meters is more than enough, especially if you're using anti-seize or mounting paste, because using mounting paste reduces the needed torque for the same preload of the lock ring. So even if you're aiming for 40 Newton meters as recommended, if you put some anti-seize, you need to go about 20% lower torque. So it is best to use a torque wrench, especially if you're not experienced. A tool like this is very good to use with the torque wrench because it can be mounted on a torque wrench. However, in this case it's not deep enough, so I cannot use it with a torque wrench. And I usually do these things by feel. I almost never use a torque wrench for this, for better or worse. When I get the proper tools, I'll be happy too, but for now, what has served me well is to use my feel, and with the strength that I have, whenever I need to apply some tightening torque to keep things in place and to avoid over tightening them and damaging screws or keeping them loose, it works okay if I use a proper tool for that and hold it about halfway. So in this case it will be a bit like this, and then tighten it with all my force. When you're not holding your tools at the very end, you're generally very unlikely to put too much torque and damage anything. Unless you're really deliberately trying to do it, you will likely be okay. You might get too little torque if you're not strong enough or not using enough force, but you won't over tighten it. So the way I do it is to hold this, minding not to touch the disc and not to get my hand there, and just tighten it as far as it will go, but keeping it short. That's it. I think this is good. This won't go anywhere. Now I can remove this aperture and we're done. The same principle goes for other Centerlock system when you're tightening it and when you're loosening it. The one that uses like cassette tools. be mindful not to put the wheel onto the disc in order not to bend it when you're working with it. Put it so the disc faces away. When you're working with those that use cassette tools, the principle for tightening is the same, only I would use a wrench like this and not hold it for the end, but nearer. And that's it. I hope I've explained everything properly. If you have any questions or comments, use the comment section below. Thank you for watching and cheers.